I love Apple's keynotes and events in general, but we might not be getting one at the end of this year. So yeah, I've done some thinking about this, and there's some people that are theorizing what an October or November or possibly even December keynote would mean for Apple, and most of all the theories I can think of aren't really that exciting, and given the major website Apple refreshed in March, that was as if a keynote happened, as in a lot of things changed, like they introduced new watch bands, they refreshed the iPhone SE, they introduced a brand new iPad. All of that happened overnight. No event required. And the one thing that's different about this year is, you know, we're going into October and November. We just had an iPad refresh. We just had an iPhone refresh. We just had a MacBook refresh just a few months ago. We even had a brand new iMac unveiled, which of course is going to be available this December along with the HomePod. And that's what most people are theorizing. Whatever the next Apple event or Apple keynote will be, it'll be about going into further detail on the HomePod and iMac Pro, which I can kind of understand. Apple did a similar thing with the Apple Watch. You know, they unveiled it, but they didn't tell us the battery life and they didn't tell us how much it would cost. They told us that many months later and then told us when it would be available. The problem though is that doesn't really work with this situation with the HomePod and iMac Pro both coming in December. What would be the point of having an event about it? If we had an event, you could say the official launch date, but you really need to get a bunch of press together just for that? You want to set out invites and get everyone all hyped up and have me react to another live stream where they go, December 14th, they'll be ready. Okay, thanks for coming. It'd be kind of boring, right? And the other problem is that we already know the starting price of the iMac Pro, and we know the starting price of the HomePod, and likely the only price, given that there's pretty much only one configuration of HomePod. There's two different colors, but I think in general HomePods are going to cost a flat $350. There's not some higher configuration. So I suppose in the keynote they could tell us more about the iMac Pro, about when it's fully maxed out, how much it costs, but honestly, do you really need to hold a press conference to announce that? It'd be very simple to say, yes, as we stated on our website, you can have 4 terabytes of solid state, which is going to be an extra $4,000. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, we got that. You know, usually at this part of the year, there may be some other hardware that's coming out, like an iPad. For instance, the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, that was originally introduced at, I think, a November keynote. Maybe it was October, sorry, it kind of blurs together. But that was kind of the big meat of that new day. They introduced the Apple Pencil, the Smart Connector, the Smart Keyboard, and this massive iPad. So they had a keynote with enough topics to discuss lots of stuff going on. We just had a big iPad Pro refresh with the 10.5-inch and adding ProMotion, so could they hold a keynote really about iPads? I'm not really sure if they need to, or if they did, what it would be about. Some people are theorizing maybe they could have a keynote to talk about the wireless charging AirPods, but Apple did clarify that new wireless charging case as well as AirPower is not going to be ready till 2018. So they're talking March, you know, they're talking Worldwide Developers Conference possibility, which is a long time away, and believe me, if you ignore products in general, Apple is the best at doing keynotes. I've watched Samsung keynotes, I've watched Google keynotes. Apple has really cool things to announce, and they know how to announce them in an interesting way. Google is satisfied with the simple PowerPoint click. Next slide, here's a JPEG of our new phones. Apple likes to dim the lights and then the iPhone fades in and you start to see how the display goes edge to edge, or how it's made, or the glass design, all of its new capability and all of its beauty. It's really cool. They really treat their Apple Sheep fan base well because they know we love seeing this stuff, so they embrace that. They make it look really neat. And I have to admit, the last 2 Apple keynotes we got were pretty exciting. There was a lot to announce. It's a really great year to be an Apple sheep. You're getting a total iPhone refresh. They finally started delivering AirPods on time, which are amazing. They showed off a new professional desktop class computer with Intel Xeon processors and crazy amount of RAM and storage and a beautiful display with better nits, alongside a 120 refresh rate iPad. Earlier in the year, we got the red iPhone 7. We got an iPad that cost $300, super affordable. Now with the introduction of wireless charging on the iPhone 8, as well as 4K at 60, an Apple Watch wearable that got even faster processing power, as well as cellular capability. Like, geez, it has been a large year for Apple, and I don't think you can really say that about other companies. Samsung released the S8 and the Note 8, and was the Galaxy Tab S3 this year? I think it was. Yeah, I think they released the tablets earlier. I can't remember. Not a giant refresh for Google or for Samsung. They've got stuff coming out, I'm not denying that, but I'm just saying if you're within the Apple ecosystem, basically everything in our ecosystem got a refresh this year. It got improvements, it got enhanced, and now with the new iPhones coming out, Apple sells iPhones that start at $350. So things are getting affordable, but also more expensive and just more diverse in general. Boy, has it been a year for Apple. But, you know, it is possible that since Apple Apple is deciding that when we want to have a keynote, we want it to be big. We want to have lots of things to talk about. And for the past 2 keynotes, they have had a lot of things to talk about. They've been stuffed to the brim with features and content that oftentimes they glance over things that they don't really think they need to talk about, but a lot of people seem to do. Like Apple, the first company to make 4K at 60 possible on an iPhone, just kind of glances over it. Everyone wanted fast charging on the new iPhones, and they got it, but they didn't tell anyone. They just kind of said, here's our new phones, and then in the tech specs of the iPhone list, they said fast charging is also possible now. Yeah, just by the way, drop that on you. There's still so many more questions we have for the iPhone 10, but they didn't go into them. But perhaps Apple is now deciding if we're going to have a keynote, we want to have lots of things to talk about. That's why we did not see a keynote in March earlier this year, even though a lot of us thought we were going to. Plenty of people were saying there was going to be a March keynote and they were expecting invites going out any day. Didn't happen, but they still announced a ton of stuff. I'm anticipating a similar type of Apple Store refresh for this winter, where the HomePod and iMac Pro become available. But of course, you're going to see it in the news. We're all gonna know what day it is. We're gonna know when the store will go down for maintenance and come back up again. So it'll be kind of like having, you know, that build up and excitement for an event, but of course there won't be an event because I simply think there's not that much to talk about. And if they do end up having an event, I feel like it's gonna be kind of boring. They already took a keynote to explain all of the new software enhancements we got on all of our tech, as well as some hardware announcements. And then the last keynote was nothing but hardware announcements. So what else do you got? The minor tweaks of the iPad. Now the iPhone 10 coming in blush gold. And everyone's going like, oh good, yeah, I wanted that, thanks. Well, what a keynote, right? To be honest, as an Apple sheep, I'm actually pretty okay with this because Apple has had very, very minor keynotes in the past. They're always kind of a letdown if you have a keynote that doesn't have much substance to it. For instance, back in 2016, Apple did hold a fairly small keynote in March. You know, not that many people were in the theater. They talked about 30 minutes about how they affect the environment, which is good. We're very glad and grateful that Apple cares about the environment, but typically we're ready to hear about their products. In the products where there was now a 9.7-inch iPad Pro, after the iPad Pro already existed, and the iPhone SE, which was basically an iPhone 5S with some added processor and 4K camera. So it was like, oh, you did that, huh? Okay, there's the rose gold iPad now. This is exciting. The keynote was over in a flat hour, and I can tell you, when Apple sends out invites and we all get excited for the next big Apple announcement, when the announcement is an hour long, it's definitely not that satisfying, especially if you don't have that much hardware to announce. So I'm kind of okay with this, Apple kind of cutting it back to 2 keynotes a year. Of course, if there is something to announce and they have something exciting to talk about, of course they can have more keynotes a year, but I kind of want to say I respect Apple for saying, you know what, we have some things to announce, but we don't really need to make everyone fly across the country and the world just to hear us say, HomePod's ready now. Thanks. Go home. Of course, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below of what you think of Apple's events being cut down. I know it's not something I really talk about, but I thought it was interesting, and I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about it. So, this is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.